Well, good morning, everyone. Now, you can't hear me. It's a small group, so I don't think it really matters if the mic's on or not. But I am very excited about this because I feel like even though you would think that entrepreneurial businesses, obviously a lot of the reasons why entrepreneurs happen is because they think of something to do that no one else is doing, right? But I see it time and time again, after they get into the droves of running a business, they forget about innovation, ingenuity, and discovery. But most importantly of all, they make a lot of assumptions of what it is and what it isn't. And so that's why this is so powerful. Honestly, I can't wait for this panel. I said that last year too. I'm so excited about the panelists that we have for all three of the sessions because, oh my goodness, they're going to take what I bring and they're going to share even more ideas. I intentionally didn't share examples that were similar to our panelists so you can get all that much more wealth out of this morning. So I got to tell you a little story about when I first got out of the Institute of Art and Design. And of course, very creative, some would say innovative field. And I got my very first project as a graphic designer with a brochure. And the client absolutely loved it. My first small business client, 1984. And loved it, couldn't afford to print it. And I was so frustrated. I literally went back home and said, well, why did I spend all this money at the Institute of Art and Design, and he couldn't afford this 7-color, whatever it was. And then I stopped myself. And I thought about it for a moment. And I said, wait a minute. Creativity isn't when you have everything at your disposal. True creativity is when you have limitations and you figure out a solution that no one would have thought of. And so I had to go from a 7-color brochure to a 1-color brochure for that client. And you know what that inspired me to do? Many of you who have known me for years until my company changed to Biz Growth Inc. And at one time it was SLD Unlimited Biz Growth Inc. Now it's officially Biz Growth Inc. For over 20 years I had a 1-color business card to prove that you could, and while all my competitors had really fancy embossing and everything else, but you know why I did it? Was because I wanted to show my small business clients that even with 1 color, it could be creative, it could be dynamic, it could be powerful. So, we're gonna be talking about defining innovation. How would somebody in here define innovation? Just shout out a word. What's innovation to you?
Patent.
Say that again?
Patent.
Okay, we're going to be talking about that later. What else is innovation?
Problem solving.
Say that again?
Problem solving.
Problem solving. Very good. So I love this saying by Theodore Levitt. He was a Harvard professor. Creativity is thinking up new things. Innovation is doing new things. And that's why I told you the story about my creativity aspect, because that's really interesting. Creativity is thinking up new things. Innovation is doing new things. Now, as entrepreneurs, this one I love. Innovation is the ability to turn ideas into invoices. An economist wrote that one, pretty smart, huh? Innovation, and some of our panelists, all of our panelists understand that. Innovation is the ability to turn ideas, and who'd better to, who's the first company we think about when it comes to innovation? Apple, right? They created a whole market, a market that didn't even know what they wanted until it came out. But here's another one. Target. How many have heard of the term retail apocalypse? Now, what's interesting is I do a sustainable growth program around, and I actually quote J.C. Penney's founder, because all those years ago, J.C. Penney's talked about forces that help grow a business. And yet, what's happening to J.C. Penney? What's happened to Payless Shoes? What's happened to so many retailers? And they're all blaming it on who? Two companies. Who are they blaming it on? Amazon and Walmart. Amazon and Walmart. However, Target is still growing. And it's because of innovation. They're named in this, I love the fast I get all these magazines, they're named as one of the top retail innovators. And it's because, you know, and here's a perfect example of the difference between Target and JCPenney's. And you start thinking about, okay, strategy, where did the strategy go? JCPenney's, their CEO that got fired, had the bodacious idea that after Sears was going down and down and down, that they would take over their appliances. Now, why would you take over something that was dying in one industry? So it's just fascinating, whereas Target really got to know their customers and what they wanted. Really got to know, like, I mean, how many have watched Fixer Upper and the Magnolia Home line? My daughter, every time she goes into a Target, sends me a picture because we love Fixer Upper. So it's those types of things. So, you know, the thing that I love about business and entrepreneurship is no matter what somebody says in any industry, there is somebody doing double and triple digit growth because one, they're figuring this out. Two, they're figuring what we're doing on June 11th out. And three, they really figure out what we're doing in July 31st with small tweaks for big results. Sometimes it's not rocket science at all. So defining ingenuity. This was the Webster's Dictionary's definition. Cleverness or skillfulness of conception or design. Well, that sounds really... I define it as ingenuity is doing something new or different with what exists. Can anybody tell me what this is right here? I'm getting your way.
Clubs.
Say it again.
It's clubs and spades.
Yeah, club and spades. Now, my client, Hamco, out of Hickory, was declining in sales. Literally, they were taking bid contracts with companies like Kohl's for the receipts that you get when you pay for something at the store at below cost. They were losing money on these. Oh, the sales looked really good, but they were literally losing money. They had flatlined in their sales, and I was hired by their parent company out of Wisconsin to right-size them and make them start growing. And they were in a commodity business, I mean, paper receipts. But we looked at the core competency of paper receipts and what was happening in the gaming industry. You're not handing in a big stack of chips anymore, you're handing in a receipt. But it has to have security measures, just like a check that you write and send to someone for payment. So they shifted, their production team shifted, figured out how to do this security aspect with the same paper that was losing them money to a market that was willing to pay a premium price for very well secured receipt paper. And that's only one of many examples. Now, ingenuity also is about re-engineering. Demonstrate how an offering cannot be obtained elsewhere because of a proprietary solution. How many of you use ink cartridges in your office? Okay, everybody, right? How many of you use remanufactured ink cartridges versus the original OEM? Okay, now, CCS, Carolina Cartridge Systems, right out of the Carolinas. This owner figured out the problem with remanufactured cartridges is they were splitting. Basically what they did is they split. So when you use a remanufactured cartridge sometimes and you pull it out, there's all this lovely ink all inside your printer, messing up your printer. Well, Sharon, the owner, figured out a way to put ink into these re-engineered, so we don't even call them remanufactured, we call them re-engineered ink cartridges, so that you didn't have split. The beautiful thing is once it was split, you couldn't reuse it again. So it kind of defeated the recycling mentality there. Whereas literally they can use a cartridge over and over and over again. So they literally will take your cartridges back, pay for the shipping back because she re-engineered a way to use these cartridges. What makes it even more powerful? I use them all the time. They actually get better page count than the original EOM. Wow. As a result of that, she established a relationship with Staples. Great account there, right? As a re-engineered cartridge. So sometimes you can even be better than the new with something that's been improved. This is a saying that caught my heart when I was 13 years old. Discovery is seeing what everyone else has seen, yet thinking what nobody else has thought. From that point of reading that statement, I literally became empowered. Obviously, that's why I work with entrepreneurs, right? But everything I do is committed to, and as a strategist, that's part of what you do too, seeing what everyone is seeing, but helping them think like they're not thinking. Now, does anybody know the story behind Velcro? You know. Does anyone know how Velcro was discovered? NASA ended up getting involved in it, but it was actually a Swiss engineer hiking with his dog who came from back home from hiking and had all these flowers stuck to him. The mountain thistle. And being an engineer, he was curious, so he put that mountain thistle underneath one of his microscopes and saw this intricate hooking pattern, which became Velcro a patent. And he lived off the royalties of that well beyond his retirement. And yes, NASA did get involved in that. So, in June, you're going to have John Dressler with the Money, Myths, and Magic. And one of his sayings that I absolutely love is, it doesn't cost anything to pay attention. But man, it can reap some big money if you pay attention. What I want to leave you with today, between what I bring to you and these amazing panelists, is technology-inspired solutions, trend-getting insights, trend-setting inspirations, data mining's magic, intangibles that become tangible, power of process and systems, and an invitation to disrupt. So technology equals competitive edge. But what's really important, and when we were having a pre-panel call, you know, this subject came up, and I said, yes, I'm going to address this in my talk. Technology isn't just software. It's not just about an app. Technology, the Velcro was a technological advancement. So, you know, think efficiency, think accessibility, think globally. Yes, technology is definitely a part of the computer space, absolutely, and everything we do with computers. But I hear all the time, well, I'm not a tech company, so how can I be innovative? And that's when I love to get my hands on them, because there's so much more. There's ingenuity, there's discovery, there's innovation beyond just computer technology. You know, I looked at all the trends. You know, does anybody know what that is? It's a 3D printer. And now, just as of 2017, they're actually 3D printing metal. So it's only a matter of time before, oh my goodness, talk about something that's going to revolutionize and change a lot of businesses. It's already starting, right? 3D printing. Has anyone heard of fortune-telling DNA? Yeah, that's coming too. There's fortune-telling DNA. I mean, look at all the Mead 123s and everything that's going on with people wanting to know their DNA history. Just like accounting and numbers, you're looking at all this historical data. The real power is looking at trends and anticipating and projecting and forecasting. So they're actually taking something from another industry and applying all this, again, the big data aspect, to anticipating and projecting. adapt another industry's tech to enhance your leading edge advantage. La Colombe draft lattes. Anyone heard of that? Yeah. Well, I know Terry has had Kyle O'Brien here because I worked with him when he was at Chobani Yogurt. He is now working with La Colombe draft latte. Well, the draft latte is it's a technology used in draft beer. It took this long for someone to think, hey, this could be a really cool way to have literally what feels like a fresh glass of freshly made latte in a can. And it's very good. Have the two of you, have you tried them? They're very good. They're very good. Look at what's happening in another industry and how can you adapt in your own industry. Trend getting. This is what I get really excited about. So here's the map of the United States. Where do most trends, we're just going to focus on the United States. I know we've got international here, but it's easier to make this point, just focusing on the United States. Where do most trends start in the United States? What part of the country? West Coast, exactly. So starts here, West Coast. Where does it go next?
East Coast.
Where on the East Coast? New York. Goes into the New York area. Where does it go next? Midwest. Where does it go last? Right here. It goes last right here. And so it's very important to understand that when you're in the Southeast. Now, the beautiful thing is we, especially in the Charlotte marketplace, are becoming quite the melting pot. Okay, so how many have met somebody recently from California that has moved here? Okay. Somebody sitting right in the audience here. Now, what's really interesting is I've met several. Within 4 or 5 years, everyone will have met somebody from California. And you want to know why? Because while we're getting 60 people moving in here a day, California is losing 100,000 people a month. They're moving. Why are they moving? Cost of living. Fires, drought, you name it. It's just like, oh, I'm done with this. Now, what's happening right now is you are seeing more of the baby boomer age moving here. They're actually buying homes because, oh my gosh, they feel like they've hit the jackpot buying a home here compared to California, right? Get so much more for your money. Well, I was asked to speak to a North Carolina International Facilities Management, and so I love trends. So I had to look at trends in their industry. And again, being in the Southeast, it starts in California, goes to the Northeast, comes to the Midwest and comes down. However, you also have to look at the consumer patterns and what's happening. And so, interesting statistic happened with Great Recession. Single-family homes started to be rented. Why? Because they couldn't sell them. Well, between 2008 and 2015, single-family home rentals increased by 56%. Now, the Great Recession was long over by then, but yet rentals, you see them all the way, you see them everywhere, right? In your neighborhood, you see somebody renting versus selling. It's not because they can't sell, they see an opportunity to rent instead. Now, so I looked in California to see what was going to happen there with the single-family rentals. And of course, the California migration, I was interested in this. And this company, HAV Communities, a facilities management company, is starting homes, total developments, single-family home developments that are rentals. Now, they're doing it in Texas first. It'll probably be about 5 or 6 years before it hits here, because who are they waiting to finally migrate? The millennials. And the millennials have never owned a home because it was so out of their price range, and they're very comfortable with renting. And they're going to be of the age where they want to have a family, and so the single-family home sounds a lot more attractive. When I shared this with the facilities management group, I literally had deer with headlights all across the audience. They had no idea this was going to happen. So that's why you do need to pay attention to trends that are happening in your industry. Start with California, go to the Northeast, go to the Midwest, and then you might actually bring something that everyone thinks is cutting edge here. But be careful where you get your idea. Use geography as a guide. Why is it important to understand the geographic flow? When I first relocated my company here in, it was 93, interestingly enough, I moved here with an ice storm, which was very unusual back then. And so one of my first clients here was a guy that had this idea as a result of that ice storm, that unique ice storm back then, that he was going to sell generators to like private practices and homeowners. He had to close the business because nobody, oh, we don't need that. We don't have problems with electricity outages and stuff like that. No. Well, he used his cell phone as his business number. About 10 or 15 years later, he was getting all kinds of calls. He was out of business. He hadn't done the generators in years. He was on to another company. He was too soon. He was too soon for what he tried to do. So if you're looking in your industry, look at the north. Now, this was a north, obviously, right, with snow and fire and ice and Midwest. So it kind of made sense, but it was still too soon. You only have to look at the green movement. In California, when did it hit with the environmental green movement? When did it hit in California? 70s, 80s. When did it hit here in the Carolinas? About 2010, really. 2000s, 2010. You're talking a 30-year flow. So that's why it's important. Adopt a trend in another industry to enhance your leading edge advantage. I shared that a little bit a moment ago. Adopt a tech, adopt a trend. Who was the very first company to have Wi-Fi in their location for customers? Who was the very first company in 2001 to do this? Yes, Starbucks. And to offer it for free, by the way. Now, hotels started doing it, but they charged, remember? Hotels charged it as a value add. Now they can't get away with that anymore. They have to offer it for free. Well, GM just is the first car that offers, but now they charge it with like an OnStar. They're going to have to eventually make it free because all the car makers are going to offer that Wi-Fi eventually, but they were the first to do it. So look at other industries. How can you adapt and use that brilliance without having to reinvent the wheel? Now, can a consumer trend impact a B2B business, a business to business, business to business business? Yes or no? Of course. Or can a business to business trend impact a consumer? My client, Cornerstone United, an international warranty company, was again another one, a family-owned business, 30 years in business, now about 45 years in business now. And they were flatlining with their extended warranties because they were still focused on the pool and spa, they were still focused on the electronics and those types of things, which what trend was happening with causing them to lose opportunities. All big box stores were, I mean, you go to Walmart, oh, do you want an extended warranty with that? Or you go to a Best Buy, do you want an extended warranty with that? So all of that was going away. So as we do a strategic analysis and we look at their core competencies, there's an issue. Because there's a trend, a consumer trend with boomers who are not slowing down anytime soon, and they love their recreational vehicles and their power sports vehicles. They're the largest purchasers of these products. And as a result, they didn't have a competency around that, so that resulted in them actually acquiring a company in Canada with this expertise and then bringing it to the United States. And they are growing, they've been growing by double digits ever since. A consumer trend made a strategic decision. Another thing that happened with this consumer trend was, okay, they wanted to be a national leader. They brought the expertise, competency of the offering from Canada, but we had to look at, okay, where are the boomers locating, either near retirement, where are they living when they're really enjoying, where are they basing out of, and how can we have a national presence? Well, we determined there were only 10 states out of the 50 that really needed to be the focus for sales offices to own the national market. Because we're, Arizona, Colorado, North and South Carolina, Florida, where are they basing their fun out of? So they become national very quickly by strategically locating their sales offices and their relationships with, and then also where were the manufacturers like the Suzukis and the Yamahas and the RV manufacturers, where were they out of, because they were trying to make those relationships happen because it was with them, not directly with the consumers, right? Trend getting, B2B, B2C, okay. Generation Z, I've got one. She's in college right now. They have a huge enthusiasm for camping. I know that for a fact because my daughter is going to a concert and going camping at this concert for 3 days with a bunch of her friends. It's not glamping, it's actually back to the camping that maybe some of us grew up with. It's cool now. So, is there an opportunity for a B2B enterprise to consider this type of business? Maybe a travel business. Maybe there is an employee benefits indicator here. A company that I interviewed called Dry Farm Wines out of California, every morning, their whole warehouse and all of them go outside for a 1-hour meditation. To be one with nature and to focus on the vision and to focus on personal vision and purpose and value and all that's good in the world. And they said at first, because it was such a, again, way in California, they're always going to be doing stuff before anybody else. They said at first the warehouse people were a little uncomfortable with this, But now they all love it. And it's just so cool. So doing what has not been done, trailblazing where there is no path, okay? Nobody, that's the light bulb. That's the very first light bulb. That's the Model T. That's the very first compass. That was considered one of the most revolutionary products of its time, the compass. You don't have to follow the sun and the stars anymore to figure out where you're going. So this gets back at my true passion, seeing what others see, yet approaching it in a different way. That's actually my company's 21st anniversary party. We actually won an international award for a 21st anniversary party. When my company became 10 years old, I said, nope, I'm not going to do it at 15. I want to do something different or cool. So I decided to wait until the 21st anniversary to have a big party. We had blackjack. We had a 21 bazooka gum. That is a 21 gun salute, everything from nail guns to staple guns to bubble guns to any kind of gun, glue guns, you name it. And a blackjack table. We actually carded everyone when they walked in the door. We gave everybody, actually at the time, we didn't have lottery here, so I had to go to South Carolina to get lottery tickets so everybody could get a lottery ticket. It was a blast. And we won an international award by the International Association of Business Communicators because they'd never seen anything like that. And I'm thinking, with all these events people, no one thought of that? No one thought to do something cool like not the 20th or 25th or the 50th or the 10th or whatever. What about a Sweet 16? Sometimes innovation, it's the little things that can get kind of like, wow, I wish I would have thought of something like that. Now, embracing your customers. What's really cool about this company, Metal Roofing Systems, is these guys actually attended and they just absorbed all they could get from the small business centers in Gaston County. And I taught some of the strategy classes there. And they started their business in 2001, October of 2001, mind you, right after 9/11. And within 3 years, by 2004, they had grown to about a $1.5 million company. And they came to me, and I recognized a couple of the guys. I go, gosh, why do you guys look so familiar? And they go, well, we actually went to all classes and developed strategy from, which actually makes me very proud They actually developed the strategy from all that they learned and built a $1.5 million company, which is now in the 5 figures. But what was really cool is their faster, better, smarter, period tagline we developed. But what's most important about that, it wasn't about them being faster, better, smarter, period. It was about helping their roofing contractors be faster, better, smarter, period. So they were offering things like technical support and actually tools to help them measure more effectively so they order the right product supply, things that nobody else was thinking of. And roofers, they're subs. They want to get in and out of the job and go to the next job, in and out. They don't want things to slow the process down because they also want to get paid. So to this day, faster, better, smarter, period is still a part of their mantra. So I always say, you can't use that tagline, that's protected. But how can you be faster, better, smarter, period? But most importantly of all, how can you help your customers? We have a panelist, Bob Goulet, that's what they do. They help others go to market with things they could possibly afford. Data mining equals golden insights. What data could you be turning into proprietary gold or investor gold? Now for me, it was around 2013, and I realized that over 20-some years, I had interviewed thousands of customers of clients. And this is where being a hoarder of information is a really good thing. Because there were certain questions, it didn't matter what industry they were in, I asked what was most important about service, experience, knowledge, people, expertise, way of doing business. So I pulled all this fabulous data together, worked with a professor at UNC Charlotte to help validate it further, and came up with a attraction retention model for going from convenience to confidence building to a loyalty, share of mind, share of wallet, share of heart. What's interesting now with the corporate culture work I'm doing is everything you see here, with the exception of instead of value for time and money spent, it's value for time spent and money earned. Employees want the same exact thing. It's pretty fascinating. So now it's an internal mechanism as well as an external mechanism for how you attract and retain quality clients and excellent employees. All from data that was just sitting there. David Jones last year shared an example of the data mining they did to convince private equity that what they were offering with their data centers was something that market companies would buy, because private equity was thinking this is only for really big conglomerate companies. But their data mining proved that there was a market, and they got the private equity and they got the funding to proceed. Turning intangibles into tangible. Expertise, processor approach. How many times have I said, oh my goodness, have you written it down? Have you written down, part of the reason employees get so frustrated with entrepreneurs is it's all in here. It's all in here. When I was working with Chobani Yogurt, they went from 0 to $1 billion. I got hired after that because they were so naturally good at what they did. They couldn't, and they were starting to fragment a little. They were starting to fall apart just a tiny bit, nothing that could be noticed inside or outside. But it's because they didn't know how to replicate what they just so naturally did. So I was brought in to help them write it down. Their approach to distributors and brokers and retailers, their approach within their organization to engage their employees to just accomplish what no one had accomplished in the industry before. Leverage knowledge commerce. Have you heard of that? Knowledge commerce. We're in a knowledge commerce society now. You need only look at all the infopreneurs out there to know that knowledge is something that people are wanting to buy. This is a client of mine, the estate lady, who was so upset about the integrity of the estate liquidation business, taking advantage of elderly, that she actually bought a trade association so she could control the industry and create a high integrity industry. Now, what she also did was create an entire online learning to make sure that these estate liquidators were doing things the high integrity way, the right way, the effective way, which resulted in 6 figures for her company, just from all of the intellectual property. And it wasn't just courses, it was templates, it was publications, it was contracts, all types of things that were vetted by an attorney so that they could use. Now, keep in mind, she wasn't putting any attorneys or any marketers out of business. These were very small businesses. And one thing that I realized a long time ago was 75% of the 90% of privately held businesses are going to do it on their own no matter what. And that is why knowledge commerce is so powerful right now. This is Gail Angelo with the Cragen Group and her interaction process. A unique approach can create preference. Of course, it's trademarked. This has become a huge seller for her in distinguishing her against other executive coaches. Avant-garde translations had the language, and I think they still have, I think the contract just got renewed, for the Social Security Administration, based out of Charlotte, offices in Africa and in Canada. They're both masters in translation, the two sisters, but even with masters, they saw a missing piece in how translation was done. And one of the issues with translation is still, you think you're hiring a professional and there's still, we hear it all the time, major faux pas that cost companies money because something wasn't translated properly. And I know for you, Nicole, when it comes to a contract, oh boy, it better be translated properly, right? Yeah, I bet you have. So they identified a piece that basically a quality control piece that added to the accuracy. And how they got started was very similar to something that one of our panelists did. They said, we'll translate a document for free that you think is difficult, and then you can compare it to somebody else. And they always ended up winning the contract. Just give us a small project. We'll do a portion of it for free. It's a low-end fee, but then they would get, because their accuracy was exceptional. So turning intangibles into tangible, what about your corporate culture? Now, when I talked about sustainable growth last year, I talked about some research I did with a book called Corporate Cure, where I compared Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Facebook. And Google, of course, still to this day is a model, and everyone thinks, oh, well, they're all tech companies. No, every company, now we're proving every company can have this ideal culture. So Google's in the most ideal. Facebook, quasi-ideal. Apple, quasi-ideal, but they have some issues. Microsoft was a hot mess back then. They're actually, with their new CEO, I'm really watching. They're doing some cool things now. But I had my business economics interns study their IPO performance, just out of curiosity. Well, first day IPO, $86 start, $100.50 end day, first day. Never dipped below the $100.50, ever. And we looked at splits, but they didn't split till very recently. In the last few years, they didn't split their stock. Now, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, from $24 up to $38 on the start amount, all dip below. So I thought, wow, this is interesting. Is this just a fluke? Or is there something to this? So I literally Googled companies that have never dipped below their IPO. There wasn't a list. I could not believe some trader didn't, or somebody didn't have this list. So since 2014, I have been studying companies, looking at the best places to work, looking at the most highly rated on, Career Builder and, Glassdoor and all of those rated CEOs. So far, we have found 20 companies that have never dipped below the IPO. Interestingly enough, one of them is MasterCard, so it doesn't surprise me that they're partnering with AvidXchange at all. I really thought it was cool. I find at least one financial company that was doing it right. So 20 companies that have never dipped below their IPO, and just imagine what that took to find that. Sometimes you can get quick, sometimes you literally have to look at every day because it's not tracked all the way to the initial IPO sometimes. And they all have these amazing corporate cultures. They all have a very clear mission and purpose and values and everything. So right now, I believe I am proving that corporate culture is a tangible asset, to a business. Now, systems equal consistent replication. Your systems and protocols could be a distinguishing and a valuable factor. You never know what is going to attract a buyer, but you better be prepared. One of the biggest issues I see with a lot of businesses that probably sell too soon, and then the CEO ends up being an employee in his own company, is because they can't let him go because of all that intellectual property that's still there. Now, Chaos.com, a company that I worked with as a startup 5 years ago, the plan was a buyout in maybe 10 or 15 years. However, Wayforth out of Richmond has a vision for being the leader in senior move management. Again, looking at the trends of boomers aging and all of that. And so they are strategically acquiring companies all over the country. And so when I did the exit interview with the company that bought, for the reasons why, well, first of all, how do we turn your chaos into calm? Come and see our calm process. Lori was a huge believer in if you have to do it more than once, document, and I believe that too. Document everything, get it out of your head. But also, the key reason she got bought was because she cracked a code that nobody else in the industry was able to crack. Everybody else was going after, and I always say, where aren't your competitors focusing? Always. So strategy from the beginning was not to go where all the competitors doing this were going, to the senior assisted living centers and the retirement communities and things like that. Go to the realtors. So one of the key factors of her getting purchased was the core competency, is she had figured out a way to build a referral network. Now, she still built the network with the assisted living and retirement, but that was a secondary focus to the first focus of realtors. And Craig, the guy that I talked to that was the CEO that determined to buy them, said now they are going to train all their other locations how to connect with realtors as a whole nother referral market. And one of the things that he said in the acquisition mode is they specifically look at their of companies and determine what is missing, and they buy a company that has the overall stronger and stronger and stronger. Makes a lot of sense. Expansion through licensing, franchising, or certifications. Advanticlean, worked with them way before they became a franchise. But the power of systems, and franchising is becoming hot again. The problem is, I'm actually in discussions with the International Franchising Association, because there's a lot of young people that have never run businesses that have these franchise ideas, and the whole idea behind a franchise is there's going to be a huge level of support, operation processes, and everything else. And so you're going to see a big, I think, bubble with franchising, because there's a lot of them going out there that shouldn't be franchising. They don't know what they're doing, and people are going to get screwed. I think that's going to be one of the next bubbles, the franchising industry. And so I'm talking to them about a whole training program for these 20 and 30-something-year-old franchisers to train them first, and then have that training for their franchisees. But Advanticlean, way before they franchised, they figured it all out. And they developed a call center. Look at that, 25, this is what they have on their franchising page. Why you should consider them over maybe like a ServPro, who's a competitor, or whatever, is 25,000 appointments on behalf of our franchisees last year. That's pretty impressive. right? They have the systems in place. They will give you the leads. What are your non-negotiables? How can you defeat same old, same old? This is really huge for me. This is really huge for me because you can still be very flexible and adaptable for your customer, but if it will improve quality, if it will assure efficiency, if it will ensure a better end result, then it's okay. Or if it's really about profits. Or if it changes an industry for the better, like Chobani. They wanted their Greek yogurt in the dairy aisle, not in the natural food. They walked away from million-dollar contracts because they wanted to put them in the natural food. Ones they really wanted, like Wegmans. They really wanted Wegmans, but Wegmans said, no, we're not going to put you in the dairy, so they literally walked away. They stuck to their guns. Terry and I were talking about being intentional. If you really believe it, stick to your guns. Guess what? 2 years later, Wegmans came back, said, okay, we'll put you in the dairy. And of course, it's one of their favorite accounts. Contractors to try the blades. Now he came from a purchasing agent background with a large company that was selling equipment as well as blades. And we realized the market opportunity was the subcontractor to the smaller regional contractor who had crews and time was money. And he had manufacturer direct pricing, so he actually had great pricing that wasn't available to these smaller contractors because they weren't buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So that was one thing. So it was going to be about service more than price, but yet he was actually going to be able to give them a better price too. Even with a 2 and sometimes 3 time mark that was cheaper because of his relationships he had forged over 30 years. So I said no. I was serving as COO on call for his company. I said there will be no free blades. He goes, no, we have to do it. And so we developed what was called a blade right guarantee, where one, whoever, subcontractor, whoever it was, had to fill out a credit application to receive a blade to try for 15 days, and they would get charged the quantity price of 10 or 20 blades for that single blade, but they had to report back the results of using that blade. And the reason that we gave them 15 days was because most of these are smaller contractors, and we know how long a blade lasts, and so we wanted to give them a fair amount of time to try the blade and report back. And of course, we had their credit information and everything too, so we knew they were viable. In 1 year's time, there was an 87% conversion to buying 10 or more blades from not giving away one free blade. Now, we had a larger landscaping company he goes to, and he says, they say they get all their blades for free. And I said, well, how many crews do they have? Oh, lots of crews. I said, give them 48 hours. If they want the blade, and for 2 days, if they want the blade for free, they have to get it out to one of their crews in 48 hours and test this blade. Now, the first blade, actually, they didn't like. I said, okay, get the feedback, give them another blade. 48 hours, 2 days. Came back, they gave him a 20-blade order. I asked him what happened when he gave away free blades. He said, after now we're at like a 92% conversion rate of more blades being bought by never giving away a blade. And he said, honestly, we didn't really track it that well. And a lot of times they wouldn't return our calls. So just because the industry is doing it way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. Now, we heard somebody say patent earlier. Why protect as proprietary? I'll tell you why. I have a client right now who's been using a positioning since 2008. Tried to convince her to protect it way back then. Finally decided to protect it. Guess what? She can't use it. Somebody else has got it. Somebody else has got the service mark on it. Oops. Somebody's got it. Now, what's the difference between a trademark and a service mark? Anybody know? A lot of people don't know the difference. And so you see it all the time. They're using a TM where they should be using an SM. Most of the time, they're not using the SM the way they should. A service mark is exactly what it says, a mark. It's for a service. So unless you have an actual product, a product is a trademark. Believe it or not, a podcast, because if it's downloadable, it becomes a product, that is a trademark. So it's really fascinating. And of course, the government's gotten really smart with the trademark and service mark. Used to be you could literally own an industry. Now there's all these different classifications for all these different, Adrian knows. Oh, I can't just get it one, no, there's like 3 or 4 classifications you have to get, and then you mention the industry along with it. You know, so, okay, and copyright. Now, what's interesting about copyright is, according to 1978 copyright law, if you put that little C, technically you own the copyright. So you should put a C on everything. That's why on your website, all that. However, if you want to fight it, if you want to challenge it, you better submit it to the Copyright Office. And so, like, I'm working with a franchise company right now, and she's documenting all of her policies and procedures, and I say, we want to send that entire manual to the Copyright Office with all the process and procedures, so you have it right there. So if anyone tries to copy you, you can have that and fight that. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about copyright. It's actually pretty easy to shift gears. Back when I was doing illustration, again, right out of college, I came up with a series called A to Z for a community college with, I mean, as crazy as it was, A was for alligator and accountant. B was for bear and a business, business and all that. And I created all these fabulous illustrations and didn't get a deposit up front, shame on me, and then they decided not to pay me. And so I tried to take it to copyright. I actually had submitted, but all they had to do was change the bear to a boar and change the alligator to an aardvark, and it wasn't a copyright infringement. Kind of sucked. Boy, was that an education at a very young age. But the bottom line is protecting equals assets. It's less likely someone's going to steal something that they see is already protected. So we are going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll get our panel on. That's better. I think you can still see all of us. So you had on your seats the bios of everybody, and I found with panel discussions too often there's all this time spent on introducing everybody, and so there's not the meat of the Q&A. So that's why you've got everyone's bios. So what I'm going to do in introducing all these amazing CEOs and presidents is tell you why they're sitting here. Palash, Desai, is it Desai? He's owner of Organic Maids, and I met him, gosh, it's been a few months ago, but I was just so impressed, one, how he's grown Organic Maids, but it's because of his innovation and process and IT background coming from Silicon Valley that has really, he's taken it up a notch, and now it's the 3rd largest in 6 years. But his mind around working in so many different industries, as well as growing a strong business here that is continuing to grow, is why he's sitting here. Bob Goulet, I was introduced by Terry, and oh my goodness, they don't do anything that isn't proprietary, period. And so, of course, and they have a really unique business model in how they approach helping people get to market faster. And he's going to share more about that as well with all the proprietary work that they do in a very niche industry in the high heat and environments that can be very dangerous. And then Becky Loranger, gosh, how long have we known each other? It's been a while. I'm proud to call her a client and a friend. And, you know, watching the growth trajectory of Lakeside Project Solutions and how she has just always taken, you know, and maybe it's because you were a pilot and had that aviation, you were just naturally born to look way high and down, envisioning what you want as a bush pilot in her previous life. And so it's just been great to see how she's continued to literally use all aspects, innovation, ingenuity, and discovery to grow the business the way she's grown it. And so I'm going to start with Becky, actually, and I want you to please share how technology has played a role in differentiating your company and how it operates, goes to market, or in its offerings. And then I'm going to ask the same of Palash and Bob.
Okay. Lakeside is that working?
Might have to flip it on. Is it? Flip it up. There.
Lakeside Project Solutions is a facility maintenance company, so we serve big box retailers, healthcare facilities, and banks across North America. And we do that through a group of affiliates or subcontractors. We don't usually use the word subcontractors around the office, so if you hear us use, or if you hear me use the term affiliates, I mean subcontractors. So we don't actually touch our customer. Out of our main office in Denver, North Carolina, we have all of our project managers based there, and our affiliate network touches the customer site. We work with about 97 clients via 14,000 affiliates. So in growing the company, it became apparently obvious that in order to continue scaling past about the $10 million mark, we were going to need to get a lot smarter and savvier with our overhead in order to compete in the larger space, in a mid-market space. So we decided that technology was going to need to come into play, much to my chagrin, because I was really loving my paper process. But the rest of the team said, listen, this paper thing isn't going to work. It's not going to take us to 15 million. And I thought, are you sure? I said, yeah, boss, we're going to have to get technology. And so I was really more akin to, well, why don't we just start another company and grow it to 10 million? They didn't buy it. So we decided to look into technology, and I was really inclined to just build a custom product from start. Our first software system to just go in and full bore and build something from scratch. And I reached out to Rahul at Product Stack, or actually through one of our advisory board members, and they said, no, bad idea. Don't build from scratch to start off with. Go with an off-the-shelf product and try to customize it. And it's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be built just for us. And not ever having dealt with technology before, other than flying an airplane, we decided to go ahead and take an off-the-shelf product and customize it, and we stayed in that system for about 3 years, and then decided to customize the system. So we don't have any, we're not a sexy innovation company. We basically just took a services business and put it on, service on steroids. We did it faster. We did it with better service, and we innovated in the way how we dealt with the affiliate network. We innovated how the affiliate would want to provide for us better than they provide for our competitor. How we do that, I'm not going to share, but they respond to us faster. They will drop my competitor's work. They'll just drop the site and leave it and come do ours because of how we make things easier for them, how we pay them, and so that's how we get our customer serviced faster than my competitor can get that done. And so between that combined with the software allowing us to continue to scale is how we have basically, those two things together is our Lakeside's innovation.
Well, and that's a perfect example of faster, better, smarter, period, right? Raul, I'd love you to stand up for just a second, because Becky shared something with me that I wanted, for everyone who is thinking about, technology is the solution. Something that she shared with me was the fact that you don't always necessarily believe technology is the solution, and you have to make sure and prove it from the top down and the bottom up. So talk about that. So when someone's looking to try to do something proprietary, why do you take that approach where you might actually even turn it away because either a company's not ready or that actually isn't what they need?
Yeah, unless you're glutton
Yeah,
for
go ahead.
technology and custom software is not what you want to do. It's
Here, go ahead.
it's probably worse than a root canal. But here's the thing: technology is a necessity in most businesses today. But I always find that technology is a tool. It can be a catalyst, but it is never the end game in of itself. And that's what I was when I first told Becky that you have no business building a custom software is because she was not ready for it, or I felt that she was not ready for it because you need a certain level of maturity. You need to have tried a few things before you can you're ready for that kind of a change in your organization. So she had to go down that path. It was the right solution for her then, but then she continued to push forward, and she reached a point in her company's life where the new technology was starting to become, a problem as well. And so that's when we started really looking at, what are the kind of problems we're trying to solve, and then what might be the best solution. And if the best solution happens to be technology, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
But we never start from technology.
That's great. Something that Becky said on the break is she realized after she went through that, because at first she was a little irritated that you refused to work with her at first, but she realized she had to get out of preschool and into kindergarten. And I just thought that was a good analogy. Palash, obviously technology has been a part of your life for a very long time. Talk about how you incorporated technology in the organic Maids and actually focused on the human factor. There's a concept. Focusing on the human factor with technology.
So my story is a little bit odd. I came from Silicon Valley via Africa. I was spending 2 years building a technology center in Morocco. And the idea there was it was part of the State Department's push for anti-terrorism, in the sense that if you can build a middle class, you would be, you would bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And the idea behind that was that if you have that sense of hope, then people would be more inclined just to focus on their day-to-day lives and rather than, and it was part of their broader anti-terrorism program. When I came to Charlotte, my company had moved me to Charlotte. I was shocked. I mean, absolutely shocked. In Silicon Valley, everybody has a master's degree. Everybody has a PhD degree. Earning $200,000-$300,000 a year is the norm, right? So you never see people with have-nots per se. It's a bubble that you kind of live in. And I was shocked to say that it was worse here in Charlotte than it was in Africa and Morocco. Okay? And so social mobility became sort of a cause for me. I mean, I wanted to get economic mobility and social mobility as part. So I worked with a business broker who helped me come up with this phrase called purpose-driven capitalism. And the former CEO passed away recently of Duke Energy was really the first one to coin that phrase, and his name is now just escaping me. So I bought the organic Maids, or I bought a small version of it back in 2012, and what we discovered right from the beginning was that the way to competitive advantage was to solve the massive employee turnover that you have in this business. That's true also of the restaurant business. Like, for example, one of the reasons why people like Chick-fil-A so well is because their turnover is actually relatively low. It's 70%, which is, would cause me to have a heart attack, but it's but McDonald's is more like 120%. So they're one of the reasons why Chick-fil-A is so successful is because they've been able to manage their turnover. In our case, managing turnover was a central aspect of our competitive advantage. It had nothing to do with technology. We knew that was going to be our major competitive advantage. Was if we can reduce turnover, then the customers will be more likely to stick with us, and we get more consistency and quality. Much the way Becky, you have the same sort of approach. So we just defined a few things. Number one, we just defined what is the best way we can actually enable our cleaners to be more productive with their lives. And we were trying to define all the aspects of what we needed to do. And then instead of using technology as our differentiator, we used the technology as to support our differentiation, which was the human factor. So in our case, we have a very complex payroll system, a payment system that has incentives and penalties for making sure you stay at work and you do the entire day's worth of work. We realize that right, wrong, or indifferent, most of our cleaners, who are 99% are female, are left with child rearing responsibilities. They like the idea of having to drop their kids off at the bus stop and then going to work. So how do we solve that issue and still get them to work on time? How do we get them back to the bus stop on time so they can pick up their kids? That all sort of fed into it. So we defined that these are the things that we need to do. And then we found a solution to help support that. Now in our case, we were able to find an off-the-shelf software program called Service Autopilot that enabled us to do things like complex payroll systems, automation of dispatching, also dispatching remotely so the cleaners didn't have to come to the office. They can go straight from their home to their jobs. All that was defined within this package. But more importantly, it allowed us to get rid of 1 or 2 overhead employees and enabled me to pay more to my cleaners. So in our case, we try to get them to about the $40,000 a year range, which is huge for them. For us, it would be hard to imagine living off of that, but for them, it's a huge bump up. We've taken people who have been living in their cars to living in homes now. We have people out of abusive relationships now into stable environments. So in our case, our focus on the cleaners and the social mobility, enhanced by the fact that we can support this because we know technology innovation allows us to have probably the lowest turnover in the industry. I want to say that with knocking on wood because I know that's the key to us, otherwise we'd be dead.
That's excellent. And Bob, Saprex holds patents around the globe and retains all the rights and then licenses what is developed. Can you share more about the whole aspect around your R&D and problem solving in the high heat environments?
Sure. So the quick history is I started in corporate America. Scientists developing things, highly frustrated with the big organization. Let's have a meeting in 3 months. A year later, nothing's really happened. I moved from a $5 billion company to a $100 million company, a little less frustrated, but still frustrated. And then I went and ran a $5 million company, and I saw you can make a decision today and do it this afternoon if you want. So I started a company taking kind of the tech world's model of lean development and how can we build a physical product quickly. And for me, quickly was days. So for most people who call us and ask us to develop something, I'll deliver something this week. That was my model. No, we're not going to have a meeting about it. We're probably going to go out on the floor, start playing with it, and come up with a solution. So in my world, it's all about protecting what we build because I'm competing against much bigger guys. And so we're patenting a lot of things, and I very quickly look at anything and say, if I can't protect this business from other people, then I don't want to be part of it. Because I'm not going to compete with a 3M, and I'm not going to compete with somebody big. So we have a gate that really stops you very quickly. Can I get channel access? Can I protect my idea? And if I can't protect my idea somehow, it could be through a unique supply, but mostly it's through intellectual property or trade secret. Can I do something that nobody else is doing? And then can I keep it charged? Can you explain the difference between trade secret and intellectual property? Because I think that's something that's fascinating. And we make resin. So we make a composite resin, and it's a very special process to building this chemistry. If I go file a patent, I've just given the world the recipe to do this, and I'm not going to get into anybody's plant to see if they're copying what I do. So, like Coca-Cola, I take that, I put it in a room, I close this room, I only let certain employees in there. If you come to visit my plant, you're not getting in there. We build this resin, the equipment we use is off limits, you'll never see a picture of it, you'll never have anything. Even when I ship that chemistry to your customer, we've already put all the paperwork in place that it's a trade secret, that they have to treat it as a trade secret, that they have to manage this chemistry. We build a piece for our exhaust system that goes on Kenworth Peterbilt trucks. This is something I can see. I can go to any dealership. I can look at this product. I can say, that's my product. I patent that, right? So patent numbers, patents all over the world to protect that technology. But this is something that if you went and built my product, I could go to a dealership and see it on the truck. I can't do that with the chemistry. So if you've got an idea that could be easily replicated and you can't defend, then you go trade secret. If you're building a physical thing or something that can easily be policed, you patent.
Well, and a really good point, when I was doing the research comparing, you know, what's very critical with Apple is the trade secret aspect, and literally a person can get fired if they talk about anything they're working on in another department. But there's a reason to that madness, and that is exactly what you're talking about. You can only let so many people in. Only the people that are actually working on this development project can be exposed to it. Now, that's a very different model than like what Google does, but again, you know, when you're looking at product innovation, you need to make sure that nothing slips out. And so it was just really interesting when you looked at the different cultures, and that's why there's, depending on the type of business you're in, you know, this culture, an Apple culture, may be more appropriate because of the protection of intellectual property and proprietary and trade secrets that you have to make sure that you're not, you know, jeopardizing opportunities in the future.
Well, and the big piece on intellectual property is everybody wants a patent, right? Because it looks really cool on the wall and it's all fun. Patent's about as good as your wallet is to defend it. You know, because there are plenty of big companies that will read your patent and they'll go, and I've been in this meeting before, I've had an attorney tell me, yep, they're violating your patent, but they have 10 patent lawyers on staff and they're going to just nickel and dime you to death till you give up financially. You know, so if you can keep it a trade secret and it's something you can do, it's a whole lot better to keep it out of the public light. If you're selling it in the public space, you've got to patent it, but you've also got to decide, can you afford to defend it? Because you might get all high and lofty about your great patent, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in court and you need $1 million to defend what you've already quote unquote invented and somebody said is your rights. You know, so there's.
Well,
and you see Apple and Samsung, right? I mean, they got
constantly
$1 billion lawyer bills fighting each other all the time on, that's my idea, this is my idea.
Well, and something that's really important to understand is patents, trademarks, they're all public record. And there's literally, you know, ambulance chasing attorneys that take advantage of small businesses in all realms. That they don't see an attorney attached to it, they'll go after that business owner directly and make them believe that they're doing something wrong. And it's a big scam out there. It's really terrible. And so there's a real education, and people don't understand why is it made public. There's no control in that regard. It's public information once it's submitted.
And you had a really good example before too about trademark, you know, where somebody went out, had a name, didn't use it. It's the same thing in the IP space in product. I mean, the first thing I do is when I come up with an idea, I go, okay, now let me go see if someone's thought about this before. And I'm probably disappointed about 75% of the time because I think my wildly innovative new idea was invented in like 1932 by some guy. The patent expired 80 years ago, and I'm like, damn, I thought that was a great idea. You know?
It's a pretty good ratio, though.
Yeah, it's a good ratio. You know, but so you've got this whole space that you've got to make sure you don't step in anybody else's stuff.
Right.
You know, just because you thought of it first, big deal, nobody cares, right? And the law has changed a lot in the last, since I've been playing this game. It used to be first to invent, you know, so we spent a lot of time with notebooks and ideas, and now it's first to file.
It's first to file,
so
yeah.
Now you're just, if
it's a
you
big
get
difference.
An idea, you want to get to the patent office as quick as possible, because you want to get it in paper and you want to get it, you know, get it in there and say, I'm sticking this idea right now. Because that used to be a big game too.
Well, and what is patentable is a lot different. I had a client celebrating 30 years and in 2005, so it was 1975. Out of curiosity, wanted to see what was patented. One of the things that was patented was the pull tab for aluminum cans. But what was also patented, believe it or not, was a 12-step comb over for a bald spot. Now, I don't think that would get into the patent office today, but there was actually a 12-step.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, there are patents out there for things.
It's crazy.
In our space, they were like, somebody's been doing that for 100 years, but the examiner didn't really do a great job, and they issue, you know, and now you've got to fight this thing. So there's definitely a lot. I mean, I believe, I see it. A lot of big companies filing stuff that is obvious and not novel at all, but you know, when you're hiring young guys and young people in the patent office to examine, you're not just getting the best piece.
Well, girls that go across the wire line, they try to patent the bit, but they invented the bit, which means that everyone who ever uses the internet will be paying a royalty to Intel. They got shot down.
Yeah, thank goodness, right? We talked about trend getting as well, and Becky, let's start with you. You shared on our call, well-known fact, both of you, the whole aspect of turnover, and there's huge turnover in the construction industry as well, and the difficulty also in keeping good trades because there's a trade shortage, so you have the double whammy of turnover and the trade shortage. So yet you've managed to build an impressive network. You said it's 14,000 subcontractors across the country. With less than 2% turnover. I mean, that's wow. So how have you accomplished this? I mean, again, paying attention to a trend that is hurting the industry and turning it around.
I mentioned before, one of the things that we tried to be sure of, not only from the customer standpoint, we tried to make sure that the customer was serviced from a customer-centric standpoint, but we also tried to go at the affiliate from the affiliate standpoint. I was brand new working out of the house. I had to try and get the affiliate to answer to my work order, my little one work order that I first got, and I had to find a way to pull him off a job and get him to answer to our work versus someone else's. And so I had to think about, well, what makes his day? How do you motivate him? How can I make him my customer as well? And so internally at Lakeside, we call our customer our internal employees. We call our customer that we're servicing the actual site for, and we call our affiliate a customer. And so the affiliate as a customer, the affiliate doesn't make money when they're doing paperwork. They only make money when they're doing their trade. And so I tried to think about all of the back office work that an affiliate does when they're not making money. And I tried to cut that out for them so that they could work for Lakeside and never touch a piece of paper. So that they could be working the max amount of time and making the most amount of money and never have to go to their back office and send us an invoice, do paperwork. We would talk with their insurance company and get all the paperwork from there. The only thing they actually have to go back and do at some point to set up with us is send us a W-9. Other than that, we can do everything else for them and they don't have to touch anything. At this point, we're about to go live with an app, a mobile app, to allow them to do everything from their phone.
Excellent.
So
that's great.
that's how we make it a little bit easier.
Well, and talk about ratings, because again, they're the face to the customer, not your PMs and everything, and yet your scorecard ratings are what compared to the average?
So we had customers like Belk, who when we came on board with Belk, Belk's average vendor rating for someone like Lakeside was anywhere from 60 to 80%. And Lakeside came on board and started scoring in the 90s, and Belk said, oh, well, that's nice, but it must just be an anomaly because you're new. We said, okay, whatever. We didn't know what was going to happen, so they kept loading us up with work and loading us up with work, and eventually we continued to keep our 96 to 99% rating, and so eventually they handed us a better part of a third of the portfolio, and we kept gaining more and more work, and it's because we are able to service faster. I typically don't say we service any better than the competitor. We just service faster. It's the same. We have the same number of mistakes that the competitor's going to have. We have just as many buffoon issues in the field as someone else. We have a workmanship issue. You lay down this carpet tile and the glue didn't work and it pulls up on the edge and you have a tripping hazard. Typically, I have just as many issues with that, or Lakeside has the same percentage of quality control workmanship issues as someone else might. Maybe it's a % different, but on the whole, we're going to have the same number of issues. We will respond to it, though, when you tell us about a quality control issue, we respond to it in 4 hours. We escalate it like it's an emergency call-out, not a regular call-out, and we definitely don't put it at the bottom of our list. It makes no money for us. It's actually costing us money to have to go back. But we escalate it to an emergency level. That's one of the things that will make us different. And we make the affiliate go back on an emergency level. And if they won't go back, not only will they not see work from us again, but we will charge them back and or open up a case against them. And then they won't see additional work. So typically they know better and they will fly right back out if they want to see additional work. But on the whole, it's just the scoring changed over time, and so Belk actually rewrote their contracts and fired everybody that had below an 85%.
Wow.
And so now the new norm is if you don't have an 85 or above, you can't work for them. And so,
Talk about raising the bar, huh?
yeah, we didn't know at the time what was, what VAR was until after we were in for about 6 months.
Well, Palash, the organic maids, of course, organic has become all the rage across the country now, right? But you had a really good reason for why you like the organic aspect that wasn't what people expect, and why was that, and what is that?
So I've always had this philosophy that profit is a byproduct of a well-executed strategy and a well-executed culture. It's not the goal per se, but it's, and so in my case, keeping with the idea that I want to reduce turnover and treat my employees fairly, part of it was their health. And so I'll flatly tell every single client, you're not my focus. My cleaners are my focus. You're going to get great service because my cleaners are my focus. And so part of that is keeping the product organic. That reduces my workers' compensation claims because they're not inhaling products, bleach or whatever products, dangerous chemicals 40 hours a week. I mean, if you get your house cleaned once every 2 weeks, getting exposed to chemicals, it's not a big deal. But to my cleaners who are exposed to it 40 hours a week after week, that can accumulate. It can cause cancer, it can cause all sorts of things. So from their standpoint, one of my favorite conversations is they come into when they new hire, where are the gloves? I give them gloves. And then 2 weeks later, they've sort of like returned all the gloves. They don't use them because they don't need to, right? So that's something that people, they appreciate that. Now, it also requires a certain personality because it's harder to clean with organic products, but it's also then that person who's willing to put that extra effort into it with organic products are usually people who are willing to work harder as well. So it sort of has a synergistic effect.
Interesting, but I just love the fact that it was about the employees first and not the marketing attraction of organic. Bob, Saprex is doing so much on this setting of trends, and in many cases disrupting markets. Can you elaborate on this with maybe a couple of examples of what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. One of the things is on the very front end. So when I started the company, we decided we would subsidize research for people. So even big corporations, their success rate in R&D is horrid. If you look at pharma, they've learned, right? They'll go pay a huge premium for a startup because their success rate in R&D is just terrible. My belief is when you take R&D and you put it in a big organization and you put a bunch of structure around it and you make it all process oriented, it falls apart. So what we did was subsidize research, and what we say to you, even if you're a big company, and some of the biggest have come to us and said, we want to work on a project, I'm basically just covering my costs in doing the research work for you, but I'm going to keep the intellectual property. I'm going to license you back for a very specific market that you have interest in, but I'm going to hold the IP, and I'm going to hold the rights to every other market. And I'm probably going to hold the rights to other markets, geographical markets, if you don't have global access to them. That has turned out to be a godsend. I learned early on, I have every entrepreneurial story about the joint venture that failed, about the partner that walked away, all along I had the intellectual properties, so I was still okay. And today our biggest product has been through all those cycles. So I think that's one of the huge ones. The other thing is I just look at what are people doing and how do you make it better? And so our biggest product is an insulation that goes on exhaust pipes for diesel trucks. What they were doing, and you wouldn't ever think this, but somebody like Peterbilt has 500 exhaust pipes in their truck business, 500 different shapes.
Who would have thought of that?
Every one of those shapes, if it's insulated, gets a metal cover that's stamped, and every one of those shapes needs a $50,000 die to make the cover. And so I had somebody come in and literally do this. They threw their foot up on their desk and they said, why can't you just make me a sock? Make me a sock that goes over every geometry. And I was like, cool, let's make a sock. And so we've taken 500 SKUs to one for every exhaust pipe. You slip the sock on and the composite gets hard and it's done. So engineers love us, right? Because we've looked at how do you get these young engineers to make their life easy? Oops, I made a mistake on the exhaust pipe. Well, if that $50,000 die has already been cut and you made a mistake on the exhaust pipe, you're in trouble, right? If nobody cares, okay, just fix the exhaust pipe, great, no problem. So that really helped on the engineering perspective. From the pipe builder's perspective, who we sell to, same thing, right? Instead of having to manage all these parts, you just take it off the tube, slip it on, and they're finished with it. And so I'm just looking at the business model and saying, how do I make your life easy? And especially at the engineering level, what's giving you pain, and how do we fix that? And can we do that in an innovative way?
That's great. I want the panel to talk about nothing new but original. And I'm going to start, with you, Palash. The cleaning business is a hyper competitive industry. And yet in 6 years, you've grown to be one of the third largest, and I'm sure you're going to take it over pretty soon. So what is something that's nothing new but original that you say has been a difference just because you've been paying attention internally?
So when I moved here from Morocco, it was 2010. I think Mecklenburg County had 12% unemployment at that point. And we bought a house, and I wanted it painted, and the interior painted. We reached out to about 6 people. Only 1 showed up in a 12% unemployment market. I'm thinking, business can't be that good in this market. You're paying thousands of dollars. Why won't you show up? So I realized there that service in Charlotte was terrible. It wasn't just painting, it was landscaping, it was everything. So part of this idea of buying this small businesses was we say in the corporate world, say what you do and do what you say, right? And I sort of expanded it to say what you do what you say, and then apologize like crazy when you mess up, right? and in the cleaning business, it's about 8 to 10%. We tick off about 10% of our client base, and this is just a matter of fact. And but we own up to it, and we've had an incredible retention, and nobody else seems to be doing it. It's very simple. And everybody says they offer the best service, but what does that really mean? That's a code word for me. What does a really good service mean? It's all about the experience of the customer. And so when you say, when they come up with piping bags and they broke something, oh, really? Sorry. There's a YouTube Indian guy on a YouTube video. He's a monk, and he likes to give these speeches, and he says something really important. Saying sorry isn't about wrong. Saying sorry means you prefer to save the relationship over being right. And so when you own up to all your issues, then customers tend to flock to you. We've scratched brand new hardwood floors on the very first day they were finished. Mm-hmm. We owned up to it, kept the customer for years. So that's about being different. Is what is it the other competition? What are they not doing? and to me, it was just about really owning up to everything. And I've sold to Samsung, I've sold to LG, and they will make your life miserable if you don't execute. And that's exactly what we try to do. We try to execute, deliver the goods, no exceptions. And we try to do that every single time, and we try to figure out a way to do it. And no other cleaning company, it's really interesting, no other cleaning company does that. And for us, it's led to hyper growth. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Becky, share something you did to get started that really wasn't anything new but different, that got you opportunities in bigger places. That was great.
At the very beginning, we weren't large enough, didn't have the cash flow enough to even go in and land a large facility maintenance contract. So contracts are usually handed out in $1 to $3 million increments, and we couldn't function with that if I had landed it. So I didn't go in asking for that. I usually just went in and said, hey, do you have one work order that's a headache? What's the worst thing on your desk right now? I used to say, what's your redheaded stepchild? I got coached to stop saying that, but that's honestly what I said when I opened the business, and I would get one work order from just about every cold call I made, because every facility maintenance director of every big box retailer had one project, and they didn't feel like they were threatening their main vendor. And I wasn't threatening their main vendor. I wasn't asking them to throw their main vendor out the door. I was just saying, hey, send me this crappy project that nobody wants. And they would send it over, and we would execute it. And sometimes they would tell us the story behind it. Oh, 13 of my vendors haven't been able to finish it, or 16 contractors have looked at it and I don't like the price, or 4 people have come in and replaced the floor already and it keeps buckling. Oh, all right, well, we'll be number 5. Let's see if we can not have the floor buckle. Wonder what's making it buckle, and we dig in. So that's kind of how we got our start. We took what nobody else really wanted, or a lot of times I would call big general contractors who couldn't make profit off the tiny work orders. My minimum job size, was really shooting for the stars, was $160. I said, I won't launch for less than $160. And that was our minimum. And we could make margin off $160. Most general contractors won't launch for under $6,000. And so they would send us lots of little puny things. Go put this toilet paper bowl on. Go fix this flush valve. And so we got tons of little work orders. And we were efficient at those little work orders because I was a pilot, I think. Looking back, I didn't do it on purpose. I think it was just by nature. I knew only how to work off a checklist. So everything had a checklist. I made everybody work off a checklist. And so if there was a process, I think Sherre said, if you're going to do it once, well, before I even did it, I made a checklist. It wasn't after I did it the first time. Before we did the process, we made it, and then everybody followed it and did it.
I see somebody clapping there. Process person.
You want to We did everything that way, and that's kind of how the company continued to grow, and that's how the affiliate network keeps the same service level across the nation. Again, people probably 3-4 years into the business said, I have a hard time having my own employees do consistent work inside my business. I don't know how you got your network to do the job properly. And I said, well, it wasn't intentional. I didn't sit down and say, oh, this is going to be a problem, let me work on that. It just happened because we created check sheets for them to do their work properly from day one, so we never really had that breakdown. And Palash said it better than I could have. We are in business because if you call 6 painters, maybe one of them is going to show up. And so Lakeside exists because whether it's a residential painter or a commercial painter,
You show up.
if we call 6, typically when we are first creating a relationship, only 1 out of the 6 is going to show up. So we have to work ahead proactively to get 6 lined up. The customer never knows this, but as far as what has to happen at Lakeside, 6 have to be lined up for that $160 job in order to make the $160 job work. The competitor's not doing that. And so that's what's making the 90% win ratio. And we're willing to get that done to make sure that the service stays on. Now, over time, you can't set up 6 painters for every job you can get out of business, but you create the relationship with the affiliate and then make sure that they continue their accountability, and then you have to have fewer affiliates for every role going forward once you're established in a network. But luckily, on the whole, contractors can't keep the accountability level that you're talking about, like do what you say what you do, and then fix it if you screw up. They're not living that across the nation, and so we continue to be able to service the customer as a middleman. We're basically just a glorified middleman.
One of the things that, if I just add one thing, one of the things that Becky said was really interesting, and everybody in Silicon Valley is a visionary. That's what they say. Everybody has a vision. But what you said was really important. You said it happened by accident. 99% of visionaries are visionaries retrospectively, not forward. Okay. Oh, I know. You came across as great soft because you had a vision of this. Yeah. If you said that, I was going to bop you on the head. You didn't. So that's kind of the thing, right? I mean, everybody's a retrospective visionary. I don't care who you are. I can say everything. And I can honestly say I went into this business, with the idea that purpose-driven capitalism. I happened to get onto organic cleaning, and I said, "Oh, this will work well." So it wasn't like I was a visionary for organics.
Exactly.
This just kind of worked. It just kind of fell in my lap. And Woody Allen said it best. I mean, I can't remember what the percentage he says, but 90% of success is luck. I mean, there is a little bit of that, going on there. So.
Bob, when we talked about the nothing new but original, you came back with something that was just so refreshing, with such a high performance, high tech, driven, a very science-based and engineering-based company. And so share with everybody what your answer was about what's most important for your team.
Yeah, sure. First I'll give you background. I started to work out of college for Milliken in South Carolina. And I was fairly good friends with Roger Milliken, and they taught 8, sometimes it started as a 12, but it was an 8-week course when you started to work there. Full time. I mean, you went to every plant, you got Dale Carnegie, you went to dinner and thought what fork to use, all these things, right? These are mostly people going to the plant and never have a customer interface. So one time I was on the plane with them and I said, why do you do this? Because Milliken's departure rate was high. I have a plant, it was 60, 70%. He's like, look, he said, it's my contribution to America. He said, I'm sending better kids out there. He goes, they'll be better Americans. And I always took that story with me. So I have the entrepreneurial story. We were talking about it before. Once I got this company over the hump, I had the breakdown. I'd spent a bunch of years working 100 hours a week. For about 3 years, I slept in my office on an air mattress because it wasn't worth going home because I was working 18 hours a day. So the drive was inconvenient, so I just slept there. And I had that collapse. I went on this whole period of growth, chased a lot of things around the world, and I looked at my employees and I was just like, every one of these people is probably struggling with something, so what can I do to help them grow? So every year in review, I'd sit down and say, what can I do to help you grow as a person, not as an employee, not to help the company. Ultimately, I know in the back of my mind, you'll help the company if you're a happier person. So I send people to Tony Robbins events. I have a guy who's been really struggling. I got him a life coach. I pay the bill. I had a guy who was really depressed. I knew he had a gun. I made him bring me his gun. Literally, I didn't fire him. I didn't tell him. I said, look, I knew what he could handle right now. I said, bring me your gun. I'm going to hold on to your gun. And then I got him his life coach, and now he's come a long way. I'll keep these guys forever, you know. So it serves, but I really approach it as somebody who struggled. What can I do for all these people? And so I make it basically mandatory. I want you to come back to me with something this year that you're going to go do to make yourself a better person. It's going to make you happier. If you want some ideas, I'm glad to give them to you. I'll pay the bill, and you will do that. And so I think that's
incredible. You know, isn't it amazing how much the human factor plays into innovation and ingenuity and discovery and paying attention? You know, going back to what you were talking about is just showing up and fixing, you know, I'll never forget, this was years ago. I was looking for a plumber for my home, and I left a message with a guy who said he would call back in 1 hour. And I'm like, oh, this is impressive. And he did. He called back in 1 hour, and then he showed up. There wasn't like an 8 to 12 or I'll show up. He showed up, and he actually put himself on the line because he got what the industry was doing, and he could stand out with something as simple as that, as simple as calling you back and then showing up. So it's just amazing. The service factor is huge. We're going to talk about data mining. You know, Palash, you use data to monitor everything from lead conversion to knowing what is working and what is not on a marketing and operations side. Can you share some of the details around that?
Yeah, so for us, it's all trying to get a pulse of the customer. So we, you know, a simple idea, right? And it's just somebody who owns a cleaning business, but she developed a software called quality-driven software. And all it does is sends out an email to everybody and says, how is your cleaning or landscaping or whatever? And you just click on it, and you rate it from 1 to 4 in our case. But on the back end, it collects a whole bunch of data. Who did the cleaning? Who was the client? What day was it? What day of the week was it? And we're able to parse the data in various ways to find out, are there trends that we can get out if we start seeing a dip in quality or an increase in the number of people leaving us for whatever reason. We also use it on the front end. When we start acquiring customers, we're very draconian about trying to figure out how do they come across us. Oh, I found us on the internet. Great. Were you looking for organic, or were you looking for regular cleaning? Great. Were you looking on Angie's List, or were you looking on Google? Great. So we have all that type of stuff recorded down, so we can start seeing where our data is. I think a bigger thing for us is we can also buy a lot of data on even the U.S. Post Office offers this on demographics for us to be able to target our market. We like to have, you know, our ideal market is dual income, they call them dinks, dual income, no kids, with a dog and living in a new house, and that's our target market, our ideal market, and we try to find those people because those are the people who we found and retain us the most. So we'd use that. It's not, you know, again, there's a lot about, people talk about data mining. I mean, Raul can talk to us more than I can, I'd imagine, is you can get into really deep into data mining, and if you don't know what statistics are, you and I were talking about this, if you don't know anything about statistics, it's useless.
Yeah.
Right? You really, really need to know. And people like to make these big things about data mining. Yes, data mining is a big thing. You can see a lot of demographics from it. But you can also do it in very small ways. Data mining is just about collecting reliable data and seeing what you can make any trends out of it. And so for us, it's just simply, where did you hear about us?
Now, Bob, you produce data, from the R&D standpoint, you're on the cutting edge of that. Talk to us about, you can produce data that's relevant, and you can also produce a lot of crap, right? So,
Yeah. Well, as a startup, you would think, I'll give you a big truck company. So Kenworth and Peterbilt, $1 billion giant companies, huge engineering staffs. We come up with a product and we're like, "Are you guys going to test it?" And they're like, "Well, no, you have to tell us if it works." Really? And so right off the bat, when we got into this exhaust pipe business, I'm like, "All right, how do we simulate an exhaust pipe? I don't want to have to go out of the truck every day." So immediately we go to the lab and we build a system that will simulate an exhaust pipe at 1200 degrees. And how do we take data right now? So we've got that, and very quickly we went all the way to, okay, we need to go buy a truck, because this customer is not giving me the feedback that I would think this high-tier, multi-billion-dollar company is going to give me. So I'm going to get my own truck and answer their own questions. And that might sound insane. 4 years later, I was down at Kenworth, Peterbilt, and I literally had the head of engineering say, "You're the only company in our entire thing that we don't need to test. As long as you tell us you've passed our test." They're written standards, but if I sign a document and say we test it to your standard, they'll accept it and they don't even test it. It got to that point. But often, at least as a startup, it's easy to say, okay, it's your customer's responsibility to figure out if this works, right? And I took the approach that it's really not, because they're not going to do it, but they're going to be the first one to blame you for screwing it up if it doesn't pass, And when you look at something like trucks or planes or anything, and you look at the liability you've got on the backside of this thing, if it doesn't go well, you take care of all this work. So, we run a truck, we run all kinds of simulations, we collect all kinds of data that if you wanted to stand on your high horse, you'd say the customer should be doing this, but they're not. And so we're not just showing up with a product, we're showing up with a data package that says, we've already done all your work, we've used your standards, we've increased your standards and done other things because you might be missing a few things. Here's the data package, and we've done all this for you. And that's really the big piece for us.
That's great. Thank you. And Becky, data mining has helped you determine a ratio of efficiency. So can you talk more about that?
Sure. I can't remember the CEO's name. I'm not nearly as good with quotes or case studies as Sherre is, but I can remember the takeoff speed and distance for just about every airplane I've ever flown. There's a CEO out there that uses the toilet paper usage of his stores to know as a leading indicator for what his future revenues are going to be. And he's always done it, and it always works for him. And I read that years ago, long before I was an entrepreneur, long before I thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I was probably sitting in an FBO somewhere just wasting time as a pilot. And then I got into Lakeside and thought, I wonder what my magic leading indicator is going to be. What's our number going to be? What's the ratio going to be? I know it's not toilet paper because there's no customer walking through my office. And so over the years, we had tons of data, and I know Google will be like, yes, you have lots of numbers. And lots of numbers that he would say, let that go. Trash that report, it's not giving you good information. So there's one, our invoice to received ratio that I know stays the same if the cogs are moving right, if the wheel of efficiency is working perfectly. It gets out of whack when we have either too much work in-house or we don't have enough work to the amount of invoicing that is going out. And so I don't need any other number if I am on vacation and I really only feel like looking at one thing and then logging off and never looking at any other number. I only need to look at that one number, and I don't need to chat with anybody. I only need to see one piece of information every day, and then I can touch base with someone and say, hey, there's a problem in operations. Take a look. We had to use it just recently. We got an inflow of a ton of work And it caused everyone to think that we almost doubled the amount of inbound work we had. We were averaging about just under 400 work orders a week, and all of a sudden we went to 700 in about a week and a half. That was our new norm. And so everyone was looking at the invoicing numbers and the profitability dollars and saying, we're doing awesome. And I said, nope, we're not, because the ratio is off. We're not moving nearly enough to the amount of what is coming in. So pretty soon the customers are going to start screaming. But it's not showing up on any other number yet. And the operations guys are saying, how can you say we're not doing awesome? Look at these revenue numbers, look at these profitability numbers. It's way better than it used to be. I said, yeah, but not in relation to what's coming inbound. You're not in relation to the inbound work at all. So your customers will be screaming very shortly. And so as they started to, I said, promise you, go look, go dig in. And they did start digging, and they found out, I said, I guarantee the teams are in kind of I call it deer in headlights mode. There's so much work, they're actually almost paralyzed. Even though there's a lot going out the door, a lot more than normal, it's a way to see that the team is actually stuck. And so that's been our one number, and I think every company probably has a few leading indicators or has a few metrics here and there, and it's not data mining on our customer tendencies to buy or any of that. It was just a number that helps us look at what the wheels of motion and productivity are for the business.
Becky, can you repeat that real quick? You said it was the invoices out versus...
It's our unit of work orders in to quantity of invoices out. And in between there's a lot of things that can happen. We might have to quote something might get canceled, things might not get awarded. So I always have operational people argue with me and say, well, those two things don't have anything to do with one another, because really the customer may never have awarded the inbound work, and they may be waiting to award the work. And I just keep telling them, guys, it doesn't matter. For 10 years, the ratio has worked. I promise you it works. It tells you at a high level what amount of speed we are moving overall. Yes, there can be some idiosyncrasies in there if the customer never awards you 20 projects, if they decline them, if they cancel them, if they award them all and cancel some others. But overall, it does in a week's time, and that's the only time I only look at it from a week. I don't look at it daily, it's just a weekly number. You can see what's going on.
And Palash, you had an interesting indicator with a certain stock you watch as far as knowing how that's going to affect your business. Can you share?
Yeah, we're a luxury business, right? We're the first to go, except for one company, Starbucks. Right? I mean, people still think it's okay to pay $5 for a coffee, which is great. But if I start seeing Starbucks starting to lose money, or their revenues are going down, it's a leading indicator that the consumer confidence in the luxury market is going down. So I need to start being a little more careful. Now, I've been on a upswing. The economy keeps on getting better and better and better, and so I'm waiting for. We all know that an economic correction is going to have to happen at some point. It's the way it is. But so far, I haven't been able to confirm my theory. But that's what I'm assuming, because I'm a visionary. That's what I'm doing. Right? I hope it works.
Talk a little bit more, you mentioned it earlier, about the whole aspect of statistics, and I'll go to you, Bob, because you're trying to help your engineers understand the statistics and what it does and what it doesn't do. Just talk a little bit more about that, because I know there's some people that, they took that statistics class and some people even said, oh, you'll never use it, way back when. Of course, we all know that's different now, right? So, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, well, the data mining thing makes me crack up a little on the statistical analysis, because I have PhD engineers, I have all kinds of science people, and none of them know statistics. I mean, nothing. And my general question is always, just explain to me what the mean or what the standard deviation means. And nobody can answer the question, right? And I immediately know you never actually paid attention in statistics class. And so I'm having to teach PhD engineers statistics. I'm having to teach everybody statistics. Because I see lots of time being spent in Excel, and lots of formulas being spit out, and lots of people go, look at all the statistics I got, now tell me what it means. No idea. And so I pretty much assume if you walk in the door now, you don't know anything about statistics, and we're gonna take you through that. That's a huge piece, because my business is solely based on statistical analysis. Everything we do in temperature, our trucks, better, worse, developing products, how do we get there? I had the fortune of having an advisor in grad school send me to get a minor in statistics, and I thought, okay. But I think it's turned out to be great, so I caution everybody on the data mining piece. If you don't have people who can do really good statistical analysis and get it down to what does it mean to you, right? It's super easy to produce the most impressive statistics and have the craziest names about it all. What does it have to do with what we're doing, and what does it really tell me? Can I predict something? On a manufacturing side, it's entirely one thing. On the product development side, it's entirely something else. You build a few things and then you want to guess. I want an educated guess on, can I do this consistently? Is it going to do what I think it's going to do? Do I have that feedback? And then you move to production, and it's a whole different bucket of statistics, but now it's, can I deliver this product to a customer consistently? I have to go sit down with people like PACCAR and show off quality. And, in that world, everybody wants to talk about a part per million. If we could make a part per 1,000, we're solid. And so it's really interesting, I think, and it's very important to understand what the statistics are. I just think a lot of people talk about it, but they don't really know how it actually impacts and what it means. Excel has done wonders for computation and has done nothing for enlightening people on what all that stuff means when you stick it at the bottom.
Palash, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm very jaded by statistics. I once sat on a plane next to a climatologist, and I said, okay, explain to me why is it so hard for a climatologist to explain what's happening to the Earth, right? It doesn't matter what your position on it is, right? So he was trying to explain to me global warming, and he went through this entire set of statistics. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a master's in engineering, right? And I'm taking statistics. And so it can be people will take any type of data, and if you're not careful about what that data means, then it can be, you can make very wrong indication. One of the things that I look at very carefully is the price of gas. Why? Because we're a dispatch-oriented company, and the price of gas affects the business. What does that mean? What do fluctuations mean? What do I need to do to predict against it? And I've been wrong every single time what I need to do, even though I've tried to predict ahead of time. Statistics are really hard. If you're going to do data mining, I think you're an accountant, I believe, or you're an accounting firm. Or
yes.
Yeah, there you go. I'm the wrong person. Sorry. I mean, even then, you have to deal with numbers all the time, and right, wrong, or indifferent, you are making some sort of statistical analysis on. Well, will this pass the IRS's gate? You don't know 100% for a second. You have to make some sort of educated guess that 9 times out of 10 it's going to make it work or not. You're making judgment calls based on that. You can't guarantee when you do my business I'm not going to get audited. But you can say we're pretty solid. But most people aren't able to make that sort of analysis and give that type of. So one of the things you can actually, depending on what business you're in, if you can actually, people just, and I'm sorry, I hate saying this about lawyers, but lawyers will never give you solid advice. I can always say.
No, it depends.
Well, no, right? And they will never tell me, Palash, you're solid or you're not solid. That's all I want to know. I don't care about, I work in the IP world, and they were talking about somebody told me about some patent in Ecuador that was filed, and I was like, I don't care about a patent in Ecuador. Am I solid or am I not solid, right? And that little level of detail, if you can't if you're not able to make judgment calls based, whether it's statistical or just intuition or intuitive or not, it doesn't help any of us. And so I always try to say, well, how can I use that to help my customer base? And we use it all the time to say, okay, I know for a fact that if I want to, this is things agreement date, but I get calls all the time. My phone's been buzzing. I can guarantee I know what it's about. Somebody needs a house clean this afternoon. I will tell them, guys, you understand, I have a 30% probability that something's going to go wrong. If I file you today, I can tell you get a guarantee because we're rushing you. Are you okay with that? Are you going to give me a bad review because of that? And the answer is, well, I need it to be solid. Well, look, this is the agreement. It's best efforts only. I cannot guarantee this is going to work. And 50% of the time I lose the contract over that, but I'm okay with that. So it's very mundane, but it's also, you can use it in different ways. I don't know if I really answered your question, but
That's okay. Well, it's different perspectives from a statistics standpoint. Any non-negotiables that any of you want to share as far as what will cause you to turn away? I know yours is you have to be able to protect it, Rob, right? It has to be protectable. What are some non-negotiables that will actually make you turn business away because it's that important to the excellence or service or whatever it might be?
We've had a few. We've separated from a few clients over unsafe conditions or them wanting us to paint over what they want to call mildew, and it's mold. It happens a lot in the restaurant industry, in food environments, and they say, no, it's mildew. It's definitely mildew. No, it's mold. The wall needs to be taken out, and you need to do destructive testing to find out how far the mold has gone so that we can then remove the moisture issue. You have a leak somewhere, and there's food for the mold to feed off of, not food, restaurant food. Food is just drywall or studs for it to eat off and continue, and it may be all the way through the restaurant. They don't want to hear that because they need to stay open, they need to be, continue their operation. So we just, sometimes if that's one location with a customer, then we may say, all right, we've got to talk to corporate, and it's just a manager thing at a location. If it's the mentality of the customer, then we separate and we say, this appears to be a corporate environment, and we say, this isn't going to work for us, and we're not going to put ourselves in harm's way, because then it's really us. It's not the customer who asked you to do the illegal thing. It's us that'll come back on. And we also don't want to put our affiliates, even though they're technically not our employees, we don't want to put anyone out in harm's way dealing with mold by painting over it or by cleaning it. You can't clean it, you have to remove it. So that's a not negotiable for us. And the other not negotiable that we have actually separated with customers for is just not constructive relationships. There's a lot of, I don't consider us in the construction industry. It's maintenance. So we're not vertical construction, but a lot of guys in this industry came from the construction industry, and they didn't leave their construction, bullying, swearing, yelling, screaming mentality for the site. They took it into the office, and they are still doing that on the phone with some of the project managers. And sometimes the customer will take to that if we talk about it, and sometimes they won't. And so we have let go of 2 for that over the 10 years and just said, can't work it out, and we're not going to continue to let it happen. It's really upsetting to our guys, and it often happens in the middle of the night on 24-hour, we're on call 24/7, 365. We keep anywhere from 10 to 15 people on call all the time. And it's really disturbing for our folks, in the middle of the night when someone's screaming on the other end of the phone. They're getting woken up, and it's bad enough to get woken up and to have your kids in bed, and you're downstairs trying to be quiet, working an emergency, and then the customer's yelling at you. So those are just 2 things we want.
Okay, so with going through with that experience, so how are you then prepping the customer or your affiliate or whoever's on the other end of that transaction? How are you preparing them for your expectations in that deal? Because you've got to educate them as to where your standard is, right? Because it's one thing to be surprised to say, hey, you've fallen well below where our standard is. We're thinking about terminating our relationship with you. I mean, how are you educating them?
We typically don't do that at our project manager level. We typically come back up to the account manager. So there's a much more diplomatic sales level. We get back with the customer at not at a worker level. It's trying to get back up at an executive level, let them know what's happening. We'll bring in, a mid-level manager and an executive and try to have constructive conversations. And, we usually let the evening person vent and say what happened. And we try to get on the phone with the person from the facility maintenance side who was on the call and say, hey, we heard there was a lot of yelling. You want to tell us what happened last night? And they say, usually they're calmed down the next day and they'll tell us, yeah, well, the thing blew up on the site and it was bad. And like, yeah, well, it was an emergency, it happens. And they're not recognizing how bad their attitude was. They're just talking about how bad the emergency was. And so we'll talk about it with their manager and them, and then try to let their manager know that that doesn't work for us, and that it is a core value of ours, and that we do separate for that, and that we don't want to see that happen. So that we're asking the customer that they coach to that, and that we'll try to coach to it on our end, but that it's not something that we let go for very long. And because we're handling, 700 work orders a week, it's not going to take very long for it to get out of whack. And if it's one person, it's no big deal, but usually what we see is it gets in check if it's one person. It typically is a mentality, and the manager is allowing it, and the manager's not putting it in check really fast. And so on the whole, when we see it, it either changes immediately and you see it right away, you see the change right away, or it doesn't change at all and it's only a matter of weeks and we're kind of pulling the plug.
That's great.
So.
Are there any other non-negotiables for you, Bob, aside from the intellectual property and owning and protecting it?
Yeah, I think we have the same issue with customers. Everybody thinks they're innovative, and then we get a partner who we start with, and we're innovative, and then after, a couple of years, you realize you're really not innovative. You just want the benefits of innovation, but you don't want to take any risks. So I've found the wherewithal, kind of the strength, to literally sit with some people now and say, I don't find you to be an innovative organization, and I'm going to have to restructure our deal because you guys aren't innovating, and you're not doing yourselves, any justice, and you're not doing me either. And I can't be an innovative organization if you're not my partner. So what I can do is innovate and supply you materials, but we can't call this an innovation relationship anymore. So that's one that's been tough. And the other is on the hiring side. We were, it's a tough market to hire, and so we were just being kind of lackadaisical. So after reading the book Who, and really going through, I have a 4-question interview. It lasts 30 minutes. If you don't answer these 4 questions in a way that I really think is empowering, we're done. We're not going any further. I don't care what your resume looks like. I don't care who you are. It's 30 minutes. I get on the phone now with an interview. I say, we have 30 minutes. I have 4 questions. We're not going to go a minute over 30 minutes. And at the end of that 30-minute call, we'll decide if we're going to go any further with this.
Do you mind sharing those 4 questions that you asked?
Yeah, it's really just, give me your work experience. What do you want to do with your life? Give me some successes, and give me some failures. And if you can't admit to failures, you can't give me success. If you don't know where you're headed, I'm not talking to you anymore. And 30 minutes, so that's all we're going. And it's amazing how many people I've got to the end of a 30-minute call and be like, I just don't think you're a fit for the organization. And they immediately go, you're right, after listening to those questions, I'm not. I had a guy, perfect example, I had a guy 2 weeks ago who was an engineer, and he works for big companies, and what he really likes to do is nurture young engineers. And I don't want to do sales. And by the end of 30 minutes, I said, you really belong in a big company. You really belong working for a large organization. You're not an innovator, and you can't work for a small company, because if you've got any hat that you say you're not going to put on, you can't work for me. He goes, you're right, I really do need a big company job. Thanks for the time you really helped me. On a resume, he would have looked really good on our thing, and I think a couple years ago, I would have brought him in, and I probably would have hired him, and then I would have been frustrated that it just wasn't a great fit. So it just get really clear, and then just have a rule, and you don't waste anybody's time, including your own. But I find most of the time people appreciate it, where I used to think it was like, oh, I'm telling you something I want to hear, you know? And so I think those are my two: employees coming in, and then the customer just isn't doing what they think they are,
Yeah.
just being brutally honest with them and saying, this isn't the relationship we actually have. So let's make it a relationship that's honest and
Excellent.
authentic.
What about you, Palash?
What are some of your non-negotiables?
If I use like 4 filter test, I would not hire a single person. None of my,
Yeah.
none of my staff would pass that test. I mean, it's just not, they don't come with me with knowing what, honestly, they don't know where they're going. They don't necessarily know where they've been. And it's an unfortunate state of our affairs. You know, everybody has their own core values, right? It's a known, least keep secret. I just actually discovered this, and I thought it would be like the world's worst kept secret, but it's actually, I didn't even know this. Most of the cleaning companies hire people that are undocumented. And it doesn't matter if you're Molly Maids, May Brigade, whatever. We haven't, partly because I don't know how to manage that. Number 2 is because I don't want to have the, Homeland Security, come raid my office. And I have no idea, and I'm not going to ask a lawyer, well, how can I do this? They go, well, it depends, right? And that's going to be like, no, I don't want that answer, so I just don't do it. But, no judgment, right? I mean, if you're comfortable doing that, do it. I mean, depending on what client you want to take, if you're an accountant, there's certain clients you're going to take and certain clients you're not going to take. We had the unfortunate motto in the beginning, which was, we'll take any client anywhere. And we were going from Fort Mill to Mooresville to Matthews to Gastonia, and we were covering a huge geographic area. We still do. But we've gotten a little bit better about knowing who's going to be a really tough client, and we try not to. We intentionally bid those high so that we can gracefully bow out. They're never going to take us. But yeah, we're not. I try to protect my cleaners at all costs. It's so hard for me to find cleaners who are willing to do the job day in, day out. I protect them at all costs. So if they're screaming at my cleaner, sorry, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you can write me a bad review. I'll figure out a way around it. Recently just had a sexual harassment case, and it was actually a difficult one because the person doing the harassment was on medication because he has cancer. Well, how do you handle that, right? I mean, like, he was completely out of his mind. Well, our core value says, number 1, we're not taking you as a client anymore. Number 2, we're not charging you for that clean. Number 3, we're never going to step foot in your house again, right? But that's the way we address it. But that's because I'm willing to lose that revenue over a client or over losing my cleaners. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do sometimes because I also have $30,000 a year clients, and that's really hard to make a judgment call on that. And $30,000 a year client in our business is unheard of. It's just not something.
Oh, sure, yeah. Very good.
Me first? Yes, please. So, out of all the things that a CEO has to do, throughout the week, throughout the day, we all have our favorite things that we do as people, as humans. What is your favorite thing to do in your job, and what percentage of your time do you really get to do that thing that you love?
Let's start with Palash and go down.
Ladies first. So ask me every morning, and I will tell you a different answer. Sometimes I love bookkeeping. Sometimes I can't stand it. Sometimes I love accounting. I can't stand it. Sometimes I like doing marketing. I do enjoy the sales process. It's very time consuming. That's my favorite thing to do, is to book new sales and book new things. I enjoy networking as well. But again, those are very time consuming things, and oftentimes I'll spend more time chit chatting than actually doing hardcore networking, right? And so it's always this pull of what I like to do and what's actually productive. Right? And so, but for me, it's networking, sales, getting to know people. I like to hear people's story. I like to tell people my story, but I also like to hear other people's story. Everyone has a unique story. And it's kind of fun to be able to, when they call, say, hey, relate back to it. And I genuinely mean it, right? I genuinely think that, people tend to be very distant, and I enjoy connecting people, and whether it's work related or not, that's probably my favorite thing to do. But it's not always the most productive thing to do.
Bob?
Mine's easy. You won't be shocked by my answer. I like to build a physical product. I'm the guy who wants to be on the floor. I want to do the hands-on thing 0% of the time. That's how much I do that now. I have all these visions about getting back and building stuff, and something always drives me into running a business, protecting property. Yeah, anyway, and so it's the classic story we were talking about before. We started a business, and I did exactly what I wanted to do, and as it grew, I did less and less and less of exactly what I wanted to do, and now I'm starting to run a corporation, an organization with structure and rules, because I see everybody needs all this stuff, and so it's just kind of funny, Maybe I should stop at the $10 million and let's go start another paper business. And I think that's what happens.
At Rahul's suggestion, I thought he was just a software company, but he gave me an assignment over the weekend and said, you should really watch Brene Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability. And she says, courage is, you can't have courage without vulnerability. So the percentage of, I love process. I love creating process where there is nothing. I like improving process where there's something broken. I don't get to do that near as often now as I used to. As the company has grown, it's someone else's responsibility most of the time. I'll get to do it probably over the next month or so because we're going to come at a few areas of the business and improve them. And so I'll get to touch that again, and then it'll probably be fixed for a while and I won't get to mess with it. And so honestly, the more I can't mess with something, the less happy I am, and I know that. So I'm trying to let that go so that I can leave myself some time to get happy in another organization. It's time for me to have a new zero to something to work on because it's not, as it grows, you have to be careful what you wish for. I wished for the growth, and I don't do nearly as much of what I love now that it's larger. There's just not as much of it to do. But I do, one of the other reasons I continue to let it grow is, and that I won't let it go, is that I love to walk the halls. So my executive assistant leaves me what she calls white space in my schedule, and I walk the halls, and I go visit everybody, and I chat with everyone, and so I usually have at least one of those in every single day. Sometimes there's two, and I'll go, we have a dog-friendly office, and so I'll go visit the dogs and the people, and if I couldn't do that, I would shut the place down.
And we had a question here.
Bob, you had said something, I guess anybody could speak to it, but you had said that, when you sit down with someone's meeting or review or whatever, you ask, you get to what is bothering them and what's an obstacle in the kind of outside of work, which is fantastic. But I'm wondering how you foster a culture of vulnerability and honesty toward people who feel like they can share that with the owner of the company and still feel like, it's not going to be used against them, or but they have the confidence to talk to you and sit down like they want it.
Yeah, sure, that's easy. When the owner of the company is a train wreck, it's pretty simple. I won't go into the detail of my story, but I come from a train wreck. I have the childhood that nobody wants. I have the young adulthood that absolutely nobody wants. In 1989, I had $200 in my pocket and I had zero hope in my life. And so I tell that story. Everybody that works.
So people are really at your side.
Absolutely. You've got to be what you want, I believe, and anything you want in employees, you've got to be first. And so everybody knows the details of my story. I've sat all my employees down. Here's where I come from. Here's what it was like. I've come close to suicide before. They know it. A couple years ago, after growing the company, I just ran out of steam, and I literally walked away. I said, you guys run this. I can't do this anymore. When I went on this journey. And so they've all seen the growth, so that vulnerability is all on me. And some of them are uncomfortable with it, but once in a while they'll pop in my office and they'll be like, hey, I'm really having trouble with my wife. I'm really having trouble with my husband. Do you have any advice? Or do you have any books? I have a bunch of books, in the bookshelf in my office. Is there something I can read? I've got like every Tony Robbins CD everyone can borrow it, like anything in there you can check out. And I put $20 inside of it, and I said, see if you actually ever open it. Like if you bring it back and you don't tell me about the $20 you got, then, But I start with me personally, and I have to be that way. And it helps because, I've been pretty successful, and I'll show up in a car that most people can't afford, and I'll do things that I have to be like, look, I know what it's like to have nothing. And so it's pretty simple for them to not get tied up in what I'm doing, and I'm fine with that. But I think you have to be vulnerable to get that. And the question I usually ask is just, if there's one thing in your life you'd like to improve, what is it? So I leave them open, and they say nothing, it's nothing. I say, and then I say, how do you think we could go about that? How can I help you solve that? Make that better.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I know Becky has to catch a plane, but we're right at noon, and I just want to thank these three for